Hello,
Good job.
everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This panel is going to be about blockchain, and we have a great person about Yat Siu. You're the chairman and the co-founder of Animoca Brands, which is a leading company when we're talking about NFT. And so yeah, thanks so much for being here.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to start a conversation asking you, what about blockchain excites you so much? Because when you started Animoca, it was a company for mobile gaming company, right? And then after you started looking at blockchain, not only to start creating games upon it, but also to start to invest in companies and build a community around crypto and blockchain. So yeah, what caught your eyes back then, and what made you keep believing in it?
So yes, that's right. We were originally a gaming company, and around 2017, 2018, we saw non-fungible tokens as a way in which we can have our actual digital property rights. And it uses blockchain technology to do that. And why it's so important is that it's around the ownership of our data. So in the past, every time when we create something online, we create data. That data has value. So if you're using Instagram, if you're using Facebook, if you're using these things, they provide, your time is giving value to the platform, but it's your data. And the reason why that works this way is because the data is stored at Facebook, it's stored at Google, it's stored in these platforms. So they control it, which also means that they own your digital identity. If they want to remove you, your Instagram account, you're gone, you're dead. You don't have any ownership of that. And so what blockchain allows you to do is to actually have a way in which you can actually have digital property rights. You can own the data and nobody else can take it away from you. The first example obviously is Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin is a store of value. But the point is that if I give you a Bitcoin and you store it in your wallet, it is yours. Nobody can take it away from you. No platform can take it away from you. It is your Bitcoin. So you can take the same technology and do it for all the virtual things we do today, like game items. So gaming is a $200 billion industry. Over 3 billion people use it. Every person who buys items in a game does not own his items. They don't own anything. But it's $100 billion they spend every year on things they do not own. Imagine in the real world, if you're buying cars or if you're buying houses and you don't own it, what does it mean? Right? So basically what blockchain does, it allows for this ability to own something and have true digital property rights. So that's what excited us. We started with gaming, but now we've done so many investments that we've expanded upon that. And I think what they call Web3 is really a revolution in the way that we can sort of transact on the internet. So we also believe that Web3, which is powered by blockchain, is the natural evolution of the internet as it is right now.
Yeah, awesome. And can you give some examples of what industry has the most potential of creating better business through blockchain? I mean, we talk a lot about gaming companies, right? But what else can we look has a powerful place to blockchain be implemented?
So yes, so first of all, gaming was one of the very first use cases because of the fact that people spend items inside these games. And just to give you some numbers, the entire what we call the open metaverse, Web3 space, last year was a $30 billion industry. So we're not talking about a small number, right? And in terms of economic impact, it basically already had the size of a small country. So when you think about $30 billion, that's about the GDP of a place like Cyprus or Iceland or 100 other small countries. So that's already happening in a small period of time. But what happens when you have blockchain is you can allow for capital formation. It means that small items that can now have value because of the fact that they can have a way in which you generate yield. Let me give you an example. The reason, like when you buy a house or a car, you sign a contract, you sign a license agreement. The car costs tens of thousands of dollars, but it makes sense because when you hire a lawyer, you can pay $1,000, you have a contract, all this work costs a lot of money. But you can't do that for something that only makes $1 or $5 or $10 a year because it's not worth it. You're not going to hire a lawyer for something that makes just tens of dollars. But with blockchain, through a single transaction, buy an NFT, you can do the legal transaction, you can do the confirmation, you can do the ownership in a single transaction that is only going to cost you $1 or $2. That means that you can create all of the legal infrastructure in a very low-cost way. And so this has had an impact, for instance, with teachers. So there's a platform called TinyTap. The platform is also known as Open Campus. And in Open Campus, what people have been able to do with TinyTap is you create content. Teachers, they make maybe $50 or $100 a year, not a lot. But people were now able to buy this content for maybe $500 or $1,000 because they're happy to receive a 10 or 20% yield. Right? When you think of it from an investment perspective, you say, oh, I can buy this house because I get 5% or 10% yield. Therefore, I have a value, I think, that exists in the house. Now you can do this for things that only cost a few dollars. The biggest impact it's had is actually in some places like in Latin America, but also in Southeast Asia. You know, millions of people who never had any kind of banking system, they were financially excluded, now can enter the financial world through Web3 because they can have a crypto wallet, because they can actually earn $5 or $3 or $10. It's not a lot of money for everyone here, but it's a lot of money for these developing countries. And it allows for capital formation to take place in those areas. So every business, Web3 will have an impact. Education is just one example, but everything that generates value can actually have yield and capital formation in blockchain.
Awesome. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs here that are curious about blockchain but don't have any idea of how to actually implement it in their business. So can you give some advice on what should be the first step for a company that is not yet using blockchain? How can they use it to try to make better business and try to make create better experience for its customers?
So I think the first thing to think about blockchain really is, again, I go back to this idea of digital property rights. So all of you are doing online businesses. So that's good. But think about where is the data stored and where does the value sit when you make that data. If, for instance, you're creating a community on Facebook, actually you're making value for Facebook. If you're an Uber driver, you're actually making value for Uber, right? You're not actually owning anything in that construct. And the point is that every one of your businesses has the ability to own its own data. How do you do that? You put it on blockchain. Because blockchain is a method in which this data becomes a public good, not controlled by any single entity. It works this way because you have a consensus. If someone wants to change the structure of the data, they have to get permission from at least 51% of that community, which you can't normally do. It's almost like you could vote on essentially the rights of your data. So it's a very democratic form of structure. So this has an impact in, you know, whether it's education, it has an impact in gaming, it has an impact in logistics, it has an impact in every single industry in the world. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to understand what is the meaning of blockchain, what is the meaning of Web3, our recommendation for you is to first obviously get a wallet and understand it. I know this is not straightforward, but it's a little bit like 25 years ago when people entered the internet. It wasn't easy. You had to get a dial-up account, you had an internet account, the website experience was kind of ugly, but you could see the potential when information was basically available to all. And in blockchain, you need to have a wallet to enter that space. The cost of the wallet is zero. The participation is minimal, but you have to first experience it. To me, we think of Web3 in the metaverse like entering a country. For instance, you can't do business in Brazil if you don't visit Brazil, if you don't come here and check it out. The same is true for blockchain, Web3, and the metaverse. You have to first enter it and experience it. And, you know, again, you don't have to spend a lot of money, just a couple dollars, just to learn about it. Then it'll come naturally to you, I think.
Well, we talk a lot about the benefits of using blockchain in the business, but still there's a lot of companies that try to fight back this trend now. If you look, for example, to the game industry, there's some companies that doesn't even allow blockchain games to be part of their platform. So I wanted to explain a little bit why there's still such a resistance to let blockchain grow. Does some companies see the idea of decentralization as a threat to their business model? Because when we're talking about Web3, we're talking about giving people more control, right, about their things through NFTs, through DAOs. Is this like a threat to some companies? Shouldn't they try to embrace it instead of fight back?
So let me give you some stats to the question of the threats. Last year, NFTs alone sold $24 billion. That's a lot of money. However, 90% of that $24 billion, which is over 20 billion, went to creators and owners of these NFTs. It's a distributed effect. The platform only made a small percentage, which was still worth billions. Spotify, which is the biggest creator platform, if you could argue, with music, serving hundreds of millions of users, only paid out $7 billion that same year. So, you tell me, is Web3 a threat? It is absolutely a threat. Because if you're a customer and you own NFTs and you're trading in them or you want to create them, you receive 90% of the value. Why would you go to a platform like Apple or a platform like Spotify where they take all of the value from you? Because that's the way the centralized platforms work. So it's naturally a threat. So that's the first point. The second thing, though, is that blockchain is not politically neutral. Because if you think about things like Bitcoin or Ethereum, embedded in its system is a capitalist, liberal, political way of thinking. So we think of it essentially as a social construct. Yes, it's technology, but it has value embedded, meaning it's capitalist. And unfortunately, in places like America, a lot of the young people have become very anti-capitalist. Right? There's a study that showed that people under the age of 30 are now actually more socialist in their thinking rather than capitalist, which for America would have been quite unusual. As a result, many of them are gamers. So when they look at that, we think it's a rejection on digital capitalism. It's not so much that it's blockchain or NFTs. It's the fact that it involves money, and they're worried about it, and they have a concern. Now, when you go to Asia, though, it's a total opposite. In Hong Kong, Korea, in Japan, people love NFTs. All the game companies, the big ones, whether it's Krafton behind PUBG, or when you have Square Enix, they're all embracing Web3. And that's partially because in Asia, there's a very positive view on capitalism. People actually understand why property rights matters and why it's important. And they understand the value of these things, which is why they embrace it. So I think it has to do with education, but it also has to do with fear, because for many of the young people, especially in America, where the rejection is often coming from, capitalism hasn't worked for them. Right? They don't understand money for them is actually not something that they like or appreciate because it hasn't worked for them versus other places.
Yeah, I got it. So let's talk a little bit about the business that Animoca does. You guys invested in more than 400 companies, which is a big number, right? And I think this gave you a better view of what work and what do not work when a company tried to enter the crypto space. So can you share a little bit with us what you learned during this time, especially when we're looking at like bear markets? How can a company survive? What are the good practices they should have?
So first, one of the reasons why we not just built and experiences like Sandbox, but also invested in many companies like Yuga Labs and OpenSea and all those guys in the early days, is because we really believed that Web3 and blockchain can actually create this new framework of a new internet in which we can have a shared stake. So the concept is very simple. If you own crypto or if you own NFTs, you don't become a customer in the normal sense. You become an owner of the network. Right? If you own land in Sandbox, you're actually an owner of the Sandbox. You're not just someone who is a user. Right? You have a stake, you have a voice, and you have rights attached to it. So to me, that's one of the big paradigm shifts that we see. And that means that anyone can benefit. Even if you hold some crypto, like Ethereum, if everyone else is building on Ethereum, you actually get to benefit from its value as well, as long as the network grows. So there's a shared network effect. So how do you play a shared network effect? Well, you don't invest in one thing and try to monopolize. You try to build an ecosystem, which means you invest in many companies, and you try to basically create a framework where everyone can participate and grow a little bit like you grow a country. Right? If you think about, we think of it a little bit like building a country. If you're building a country, you don't want to build a monopoly. You don't want to build one company that owns everything. You want to have lots of small businesses, you want to have some large businesses, but you want to have a distributed effect. You don't want to have a monopoly, right? You want to have everyone build in that environment. And that's basically why we invested the way that we did. The other thing is this. Because my background, I've been around for a while. My first game company I joined was in the 80s with Atari, so I'm definitely dating myself. And so I witnessed internet, the first phase with Web 1, I witnessed Web 2, and to me, Web 3 is what Web 1 was supposed to do, which is this open internet, the way that we can share stuff the way that we're supposed to. So how do we build something with the benefit of hindsight? And so we thought, That's the way to do it. Invest in infrastructure, support it from the beginning, because right now, even Web3 has so much value from its development. It's really like the internet 2001, 2002. So it's very, very early still, and there's an opportunity for everyone to still participate in it.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm curious to know, what is your vision to the future of blockchain? What tendencies you're looking that will probably come up in the future? How do you see this in like 5, 10 years? Will blockchain will be in everything?
So I think everything will touch, blockchain will touch everything. We think Web3 is a natural evolution of the internet. But let me explain why. First of all, none of us want to be digital colonized. We don't want our data to be at Facebook. We don't want our data to be at Amazon. We want to have data sovereignty. Our identity is based on our data. Think about AI. All this benefit that we seem to be seeing in AI, who made the value of this AI? All of us who created the data. And yet we're not the ones who get compensated for it. So this is one of the main reasons why the data ownership is possible. But how do you own data if it's centralized? If you give the data to one party, they'll monopolize it. That's one of the reasons why blockchain is so important. But the second part is around understanding value. So what Web 1 did, it basically democratized information. Everyone had the same information. So as a result, maybe someone who was, creating commodities in Brazil, he could know what the cost of something was in America, and he could charge the right price for it in the paradigm of Web 1. So he had information symmetry. There was no middleman that could take advantage. But the thing that they didn't understand was financial knowledge. They didn't understand what was money, what was investing, what was risk. They don't understand it because they weren't teaching that. As a result, we have a very small number of people in the world who understand financial literacy. You have a bank account, but you know nothing about the financial system. We teach our children algebra, but we don't teach them money. We don't teach them economics. So they come out of school and they don't know anything around this. But in Web3, capitalism, economics, and value is attached from the beginning. And through gaming, they will learn about this at the early stage. So what happens to the world when not 1 or 2% are financially literate, but 90% are financially literate, and they're financially included? To us, that is the big hope and the dream, you would say, in terms of making it possible. And we saw this in places like the Philippines. During COVID, millions of Filipinos who did not have any bank account were able to join the financial world by playing a game, making a little bit of money, and surviving through COVID. That was possible in that paradigm. They didn't have university education, and they were still able to do it because they were becoming financially included. That's Web3.
Yeah, awesome. In Brazil, we also have a lot of people change their life through blockchain, so it's awesome. I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future for the sector.
Me too. Thank you.
Awesome. Our time is up. Thank you so much for everybody who was here.
Thank you.